and gentlemen, it is an extraordinary honor speaking to you live at TEDxNkana today. I have a very strong passion for radio, a deep love affair, if I may, and I thought it would be a very nice idea to switch things up at TEDx and present my talk using what's closest to home for me, and that's radio. I hope you don't mind. Will you allow me to do that? Yes. All right. I've been in the radio industry for a little over 12 years now. I loved listening to the radio as a kid. I worked on radio for a long time, and through a lot of struggles and challenges, which would have made me give up along the way, I now own a radio station. I'd like to share my life story with you. It's a story of passion. Are you ready to hear it? Yes. If you're ready to hear it, say, give us! Give us!
Nice one. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Kalenga. My parents gave me that name, I believe, because they believe in God so much. The name itself means God the creator, or a creative person, or somebody who creates a lot. And it could explain why, no matter what I try to do in my life, I always find myself in the creative space somehow. I've loved radio from as far back as I can remember. From as early, I believe, as 2 years old. As early as 2 years old. As you can see here, I'm seated next to a radio, right? This is 1987. I'm 2 years old in this photo and seated next to a radio. And that's as far back as I can remember the love for radio coming from. Now, this love I had through primary school, I had through high school, I wrote my grade 12, and in my gap year, it's all I could literally think of, just being on radio. It was my first love, to a point that when my dad took my young brother and I on a trip to Lusaka, my first ever trip to Lusaka, one of the first things I wanted to see in Lusaka was Radio Phoenix. When my dad took my young brother and I to Lusaka, I asked a cousin of mine to take us around to Radio Phoenix, and the moment I entered that studio, that was the beginning of a very deep love affair, if I may. I went around the studio, I was introduced to radio presenters there. I remember people like K-Smash, Gesh Groove, Alcal, and just the mere sight of the studios, to me, fed something into my mind that has not left me to this day, a deep love for radio. When we came back home, that's all I could think of, working in radio. I remember in my gap year, people would ask me what I wanted to do with my life. And I would lie to people about wanting to be a lawyer, wanting to be a doctor, wanting to be a chemical engineer, and things like that. I mean, which Zambian kid would have the courage to tell their parents that they want to be on radio, to be a radio presenter? I mean, even your own parents look at you funny, especially in this country, where radio DJs don't amount to much. I mean, if you were to look or ask any radio DJ how much they make, a lot of them would tell you it's not really much. And you, of course, you'd understand your parents when you tell them you want to be a radio presenter and the looks they would give you. You'd understand why they would give you that look. Now, after my gap year, my parents sent me to study business administration, to do a degree in business administration. I went to school, okay? And the first few weeks, quite boring. First few months, getting worse. I wasn't paying attention at all in any of the classes that I was supposed to be attending. I had economics, I had business management, business law, but I hardly attended any of these classes. What was I doing most of the times? Going for auditions from radio station to radio station. Think of any radio station which was in existence in Lusaka in the year 2005. I went there. I went to Horn FM. I went to QFM. I went to Hot FM. Any radio station that was already in existence in Lusaka in that year, I went to. And not once. And not twice. Probably about 3 times. But none of those auditions were successful. Quite disappointing. But regardless, I spent most of my time going for auditions when I was supposed to be going for classes. And this was evident at the end of my first year when the results slip was handed to me. There were Fs, and there was also the option of later on repeating my course or changing my course altogether. But I told my parents, you know what? It would be a complete waste of money to go back to school, and I became the proverbial dropout. I knew deep down in my heart what I wanted. My parents were a bit upset. They thought I should take up something at a smaller college or something, but I really knew deep down what I wanted. I really knew what I had passion for. So I came back home to Kitwe, started working with my dad. He was into doing a bit of construction then. And I started helping out with that. And one day, after work, we're buying cement, I think, I was buying cement in Kito Hardware. That day, I remember so well, I was so tired after work, and I was seated in my bedroom, by the bedside. And like I stated, I've always loved radio. Even in my bedroom, there was a little radio right next to my bed. And I started playing around with the radio, trying to catch something interesting to listen to that night. And as I'm tuning the radio, I pick a voice making an announcement. And the voice is saying, if you're hearing this right now, call this number. And I remember the number so vividly to this day. The number the person was announcing was 0212-222-898. The radio station was YRFM, and the announcer said, if you're hearing this right now, call this number. Let us know how you're hearing us wherever you are listening from. And I called the number. I didn't have a phone then. I had to dash to my father's phone, grab my father's phone, called that number, and I told him, I just heard the announcement on radio. What is this all about? And the person says, where are you tuned in from? And I said, I'm in Nkana East right now. How are you getting the signal? I said, very clearly. Okay, interesting. And I asked excitedly, when are we having auditions? And they said, well, now just keep tuning to the radio. I kid you not, I started moving with the radio with me every day from that day onwards. If it was in my father's car, I would tune into the radio to make sure I did not miss out an announcement. And one day, as promised a month later, that announcement came. Auditions to be held in exactly 2 weeks' time. The day came, I went over to the building that was announced, first floor Anchor's house, and what I saw, I could not believe. A queue long enough to reach Baghdad at Anchor's house that day. And I thought to myself, what are the chances of getting into the radio station? I lost hope. I joined the queue about 9 a.m., 9:10-ish a.m., and I only managed to enter the building about 14 hours. And I entered the building, and there were two directors there interviewing us, and they were asking questions about why should we bring you on into RFM? What qualities do you have? What special thing would you bring to this radio station? And I was there answering all these questions. They took us into another room where they were doing auditions, recorded auditions. And they tell us, and they told me particularly, you've got 60 seconds to say anything into the microphone. Anything for this audition. And I remember Akon was like the really hot artist then, and I knew his profile from the top of my head. And I went blabbering about for more than 60 seconds, talking about Akon, this, Akon, that. And I flowed so much, and I could see the guy doing the audition, nodding his head, and I thought to myself, I've nailed it. And true to my thoughts, a week later, a phone call comes through and says, you've made it, you're one of the 5 people who will be starting work at YRFM. I was excited. I couldn't believe it. A dream came true. I was finally going to be on radio. A week later, I went to YRFM. We went through a second stage of auditions and 1 month of training, and finally, I was on radio. I couldn't believe it. It was at 15 hours that day in July of 2007. I finally went to radio, and you could tell from my excitement that day when I spoke on radio that a dream had come true. This was one of my first days on radio, and you can tell from the smile that there was joy in my heart, yeah? I felt like Steve Jobs launching the iPhone that day. I felt like Usain Bolt on the running track. I can't describe to you enough how much joy I had that day, okay? I worked at YRFM for 3 years, and I needed a new radio experience, so I moved on to Flavor FM, where I worked for 3 years as well. And while at Flavor FM, I got a phone call. A radio station was opening up in Solwezi, had already been running for a few months, wasn't doing quite well. And I get a call and somebody tells me, we've heard you're quite good in radio, and we feel you're the person we need to make this radio station work. So I took up the offer, moved to Solwezi, and I was a station manager for a radio station called Beats FM. I was still in my comfort zone. I was still in my happy zone. I was still in radio, but only in management now. I worked at Beats FM for a year, but one thing that I wasn't quite happy about is that I couldn't do radio on my own terms. And it's while there, after working for a year, that I decided, you know what? If I'm going to continue in radio, I might as well do radio on my own terms and do the things that I want to do in my own radio station. And that year, I promised myself, if I ever work in radio again, it's as an owner of a radio station. And I resigned from my job that day. When I resigned from BSFM, I started a company called Plus One Media, which handles a lot of promotions for mostly banks and I would do radio adverts as well. So I was still a bit close to my passion, that's radio. At least I was still recording a few adverts for radio. Now, while I was running around in Lusaka, I was looking for clients for this same Plus One Media. While I was running around in Lusaka, I bumped into a friend who tells me, dude, have you heard that the Independent Broadcasting Authority, IBA, is actually advertising for people who would love to open radio stations? They're giving away licenses. I said, I didn't know about that. So I checked the papers, checked the website, and true to his word, there it was, the announcement that applications were open for radio stations. So I applied. And one thing that was on the application was that the deadline, and that deadline was only 5 days away. 5 days away. And it was a long list of requirements that I had to put together within that 5 days. I had to run around from one end of the country that week to the other, literally like a headless chicken, running around, putting all this information together, all these documents together, until finally I beat the deadline a day before, had it in the papers, and a week later, got a call saying your application has been received, you have to travel to Kasama for interviews. Now, I need to emphasize this. At this point in my life, business wasn't going quite well. I was broke. Literally broke. Like if my bank account was a room and you screamed in that room, there would be an echo. I was that broke. Things were terrible. And to get a call telling me I need to go travel to Kasama for this interview when I completely had no money was news I didn't want to receive right there and then. I was hoping the interview would be closer, but it wasn't. I had traveled to Kasama, made a few calls, called a few friends, and managed to get a free ride to Kasama. Interviews were happening from there for radio licenses, and I was one of the first people to be called in for the interviews. There were groups and groups of people, and I get into the interview, and there's 5 seats in front of the panel of the interviewers, and I, the interviewee, sit on one of the 5 seats there. I take a seat, and the first question they ask me is, why are you alone here? So I say, well, the letter had my name on it, so here I am alone. And they say, no, you have to be here with your board of directors. And I said, well, the letter only had my name on it, so here I am. And they start whispering to each other. I'm thinking, okay, this is not going well so far. They whisper to each other, and I'm thinking, okay, so far, bad start. Poor start. But they decide to still go on with the interview, and they start firing me with all these technical questions I had no answers to. A total of about 20 questions, and had answers to almost none of these questions. Until finally, the Director General of the Independent Broadcasting Authority, Mrs. Jocelyn Mapoma, asked a question which I was dying for. She asked me, of all the applicants here, why should we give you this license? And I breathed a sigh of relief. And I shared my life story. I told them everything I had just explained to you. My whole life story, my passion for radio. And I could see from her face particularly that she was feeling what I was feeling. The other interviewers though, faces blank. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not going well. After the interview, I even called my wife and I told her, babe, they asked me a total of 21 questions. I only answered one. Let's just forget about this. It's not happening. And I made my way back to K2A. Gave up completely. A month later, email comes through. It's an email from the IB, and they're telling me, of all the applicants, you were the successful one. You're getting the license for Nakonde. I'm like, wow! Jumped around in the house. I was crying, laughing, screaming, an old mix of emotions. I think I went through a whole spectrum of emotions that day. And it was just one of my happiest days of my life. Like, finally, something that I've been praying for a long time. I'm still in love with radio. I have a deep passion for radio. I now have an opportunity to own a radio station. Now, at the bottom of this email were the conditions. This radio station needed to open in exactly 120 days, or you forfeit the license. 120 days, and I'm broke. I'm looking at the budget it's going to take to open a radio station. It's 1,000 times more than I have in my bank account, which was about 0. So, 120 days left, no money. 90 days left, I'm praying, still no money. 60 days left, nothing is happening. Completely no money. 40 days left, 30 days left. At this point, I'm reading books like The Secret, trying to learn about the law of attraction. I'm reading the Bible, trying to have some miracle money coming through my account. None of this is happening. 30 days left, and the phone rings. It's the Chief Marketing Officer of Barclays Bank. I answer the phone. Hello? And she says, Kalenga, are you in Lusaka? I say, no, I am in Ndola right now. I was living in Ndola with my wife and baby there. Are you able to come to Lusaka tomorrow? I say, yes. So I make a phone call to a friend who owns a bus station, a bus company. And I tell him, dude, I need to travel to Lusaka, I need a bus ride. And he says, no problem. I like this guy. His answer is always no problem. And he puts me on a bus and I head to Lusaka. And in that Barclays interview, the meeting, they tell me, we need the Barclays Cup promoted. Are you able to do this? And I say, no problem. God is able. We're going to do this. And they give me this deal. And immediately after the meeting, they tell me, send us the invoice. And I send the invoice and they say, we'll send you the money. The following day, the money comes through. I make a few calculations, put a team together, and I calculate the profit is everything I need to open this radio station. I had everything I needed to open the radio station. I left the team working on that Barclays Cup promotion. I dashed to Nakonde, put up a team of electricians, carpenters. Everyone needed to open that radio station, and we worked that 2 weeks to the deadline. I had carpenters. This is at 2 a.m. in the morning. I had carpenters working around the clock to put the radio station together. There you can see, this is midday the following day. We worked in record time, opened this radio station in about 2 weeks and beat the deadline, that 120 days. I really thank God for that. Ladies and gentlemen, the things that I went through the past 1 year, without passion, I don't believe I would have been able to make it. Only passion can do this. And I always encourage people to follow their passions because without it, there's a lot you can go through.
Ladies and gentlemen, I came here today to talk about turning passion into purpose. I strongly believe and have come to realize that my love for radio is in me for a purpose, to help others, to serve others. I have a passion for radio and I also love reading. I read a lot. I believe I was given a radio station 1,000 kilometers away from my comfort zone to a town where illiteracy is extremely high. I believe the forces that be sent me to Nakonde to help bring down illiteracy there using radio. And we have found and continue to find ways in which we can help with that. Passion is what drives me to keep pushing in uncomfortable situations and locations. Passion is what drove Steve Jobs to go through failures, being fired from his own company, coming back and giving us the iPod and the iPhone. Passion for business is what drives DJ Spoo to build businesses and promote his products like no one else in Africa. He promotes his energy drink with so much passion. I believe there's a lot we can do for ourselves, for those around us, and for all humanity when we do what we love, when we follow our passions. Thank you for listening.